You're listening to Jazz here on Classic 107. My name is Neil Colligan, and that was the Winnipeg Jazz Orchestra from an album called Steppin' Out, celebrating 10 years with their version of the Duke Ellington Orchestra favorite, Caravan, and the arrangement there by Jeff Presslaff. That's actually going to be one of the works that's going to be performed this coming weekend, November 8th and 9th. 3 concerts, one on Saturday night, 2 on Sunday. And it's part of a concert that is going to be called Ellington, Black, Brown, and Beige. And 2 artists are joining me in the studio to talk about it. I'm very glad to welcome Fred Stride, who's over here on my left, and right next to him, the very beautiful Heitha Forsyth. And, you know, the interesting thing about this particular work, it's one of those works where whenever we say Ellington, we're usually thinking of the more jaunty Ellington, the one who's bringing us Take the A Train, or it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. But this is something that is a tremendously impressive and ambitious work. Tell me a bit more about it there, Fred.
This was done for a concert in January of 1943, where Duke wanted to depict the history of the American Negro, essentially from slavery times to then the contemporary mid-World War II representation of blacks in Harlem. And so the kind of the journey of their not so great beginnings in North America to what was getting a little bit better. He's also kind of seen as part of that, a lot of that Harlem Renaissance. You can make a lot of cases that he was inspired by a lot of that, about not just going with the stereotype, but to kind of have people see African Americans in a more positive light, and to acknowledge all their accomplishments and everything else to get where they got by 1943.
Well, and certainly it was a very significant time for African Americans. The Second World War was just underway.
That's right.
That there were so many tremendous opportunities economically for them. And also the fact that, for instance, even recognition, the first black novel had just become a bestseller. Not that there hadn't been previous books, but there was one finally a bestseller. And Hattie MacDonald had won the Oscar for Gone with the Wind, although in a role that was questionable.
The other thing about that piece is the scale of it. I mean, we're all talking about the tunes you're mentioning there. But even going back further, Mood Indigo and some of those earlier pieces of Duke's from the early 30s, late 20s, early 30s, they're all kind of restricted to the 3 to 3.5 minute time limit of the 78 RPM records at the time. So we kind of associate Duke as writing all these miniature pieces. And then there's the jazz, how jazz people saw it at the time, that the jazz is music to dance to. It's pop music, although we don't kind of think of it that way anymore. We think of it as a little more artistic, but at the time it was very much pop music. And so all these critics showed up because it was a heavily promoted concert. Duke's written this big new thing, so all of these newspapers and magazines sent out their critics, the jazz ones and the classical ones, and almost universally they all walked away going, well, we didn't like it. And some of them were so, and you can read into this whatever, but some of the people, well, how dare Duke abandon his jazz roots? Bad enough. Or worse for me is, who does he think he is, writing classical type formal music? Well, for Duke, he didn't see it that way. He didn't set to write a symphony. He just wanted to tell the story, and it's a big story. He wanted to use the resources, the members of his band, the way he wrote music, and try to create something new. So artistically, this is a huge undertaking that he did. And actually, he wrote it. He started writing, I guess, somewhere around the end of the first week of December of 42, and they performed the concert on January 23rd, and so you've got to back up a couple of weeks of rehearsals. So he wrote it very quickly, but had been gestating for about 12 years, actually, in his mind, before he actually put pen to paper.
Yeah. Now, Heitha, you've got a fairly significant role in this, because obviously there's some vocal parts in the work. You're in the blues section, which kind of is in the middle, the brown, as it were.
Yes.
Which is kind of still referencing some of the middle period for Black Americans in that period. How did you find it as you're approaching it?
Well, I wasn't as familiar with the work. Of course, I was more familiar with the more known Duke Ellington examples. I was familiar with Come Sunday, which is also a part of this suite. Am I mistaken? He wrote that before and added it to this?
No, that was for Black, Brown,
and so
Beige.
then he just took it out and
he
gave it to Mahalia or whoever it was.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. Well, see, and I knew that, but with the blues, basically when Fred emailed me and they said, "Can you sing this part for this concert?" and it was my first chance of actually having it listen to it, and it's interesting because it is, like he said, it's not something that you're used to doing as a vocalist singing with a big band, where it is much more like singing with an orchestra. It's rubato. You have to have a push and pull. You have to have a relationship with your conductor that is very much, push and pull. As I said, it's not, here we go, starting the tune. You just sing through it like, don't
stand back for a bit while someone solos and
exactly.
that's it.
It's not like that. It's very much it's very ambitious. It's something that I think that even in our run through last night, it's something that people who play in the jazz orchestra idiom don't experience very often. You experience this kind of music, this rubato, this through composed idea in classical works, and not in this sense. So it was an interesting thing to sort of I'm glad I have a bit of a background in classical music, because I was able to understand how it went based on that, but not because I was as trained as a jazz singer and I could understand that. So
well, and it's worth mentioning here, of course, that you were trained French horn as well as trumpet.
Yeah.
So you've got that instrumentalist view that can take you through what the guys in the background are doing.
Yes, yeah.
And but at the same time, as a singer, you also go through a lot of different material. I mean, you also have another sort of sideline. I wouldn't call it sideline. It's your other personality, Saul James, country artists and stuff like that. So you can approach music from so many different places.
Yes, yeah, and luckily, I think when you have to be a versatile musician, I consider myself a musician because of the versatility of the career that I've had to have in order to be considered a vocalist that can make money in this business. I sing everything from soul to pop to classical. I sing in other languages. I do whatever I have to do, which means that when a song that is unusual to the format of what it's being presented to you as, like the blues in Black, Brown, and Beige comes along, I felt I wasn't very intimidated, but I was definitely surprised.
No.
Definitely.
And from your perspective, Fred, I mean, as the arranger of this work, you did a lot of work to bring this thing together.
I didn't arrange it, so the notes are all Duke's.
But you had to track down a lot of material.
I had to transcribe big hunks of it that were missing. Some of it I was able to get bits and pieces of original scores.
Yeah.
I totally kicked myself when I got off the plane. I went, I left one of the most fun things. Is I have a photocopy of the very first page of Black. And they can date when this piece was started, because Duke's playing in a movie theater, and they would play a movie, and then the band would play, and there was another young artist just kind of starting out, Frank Sinatra. And on the front page is Sinatra's name and his address. Sure, 1942 address. But I think that this was just such a cool thing. You can say, oh, that's the movie, so people know this movie, and so Duke started writing at this time, and so some of that story. But as she mentions about the versatility of the career, I think for all of us that are freelance musicians, whether you center in, for me, it's centering a little bit more on jazz as much as possible. But I'm thinking back, you're singing country and all this other stuff. I bought my house writing disco arrangements for TV shows. So, stuff I haven't played, or I don't even know where that music is, and never will play it ever again. But it was exciting. I was pretty young, and it's exciting. And the new experience just kind of adds to your whole overall musicality.
Absolutely.
So that when you do encounter things that are a little bit outside where you want to be, you can know how to make that adjustment. So last night, it went great. So she knew exactly what we're supposed to do. But she was right in that we've never worked together before, so she has to get used to me, and I have to get, she wants to stretch this a little bit more. Okay, so I'll have to wait there.
Or should I? Or shouldn't I? Or should I be watching him? Downbeat?
And then, of course, the worst is if we start second-guessing one another, then nobody makes a choice.
Well, don't worry. I can be a diva.
Don't go there. Don't go.
Well, and I do want to bring this back to say someone who's not familiar with the work, or at least even with Ellington for that matter, that one thing that was almost tantamount and always that had to be out there is that it had to swing. With Ellington, if it didn't swing or if it didn't have that sort of feel about it, that this was a work that's going to grab you and keep you there, then that isn't Ellington.
I know a lot of musicians that do still think along those lines, that the music has to swing and it has to have improvisation. I was pointing out to the band last night that there's a couple of short improvised tenor solos. And there's one where the tenor solo, and these are some of the pages that I got. There's a long, sounds like improvised tenor cadenza. It's a whole series of them.
Yeah,
and they're all written. So most of the solo. So it's not jazz is just not about the swinging, because then what do you do with the Stan Getz wonderful bossa nova records of Stan Getz, right? So. And there's lots of examples of non-swinging music that has jazz. Sometimes it has improvisation, but Duke didn't seem to be
as concerned.
No,
yeah.
he was writing music that he wanted to express him. Because also a part jazz is the way it's played, the individualism, especially in his band. The way that, so he would assign such and such a trumpet melody to that part because that player was sitting there. Or the difference between what Lawrence Brown would play, his solos, his lyrical ones, as opposed to, Tricky Sam or something like that, with all that plunger. Or Juan Teasel and playing low things that are awkward to play on the slide trombone, but he's playing a valve trombone.
Yeah, so he's the kind of he's that artist who's looking at each of the paints on his palette there and saying, this is how this will come together.
That's where it comes from. He got a scholarship to art school.
Yeah.
And decided that he was making more money playing piano and putting dance job things together.
Well, like you referring back to your disco music, right?
Exactly.
What is it going to put the money in the bank?
Well, yeah, and it's making a living, getting started, the whole experience. I wouldn't trade any of that. It seems a little bit silly and fun now, especially when I tell students that, but not to discount anything, because you never know where those adventures are going to take you to, or what they're going to add to your technical skills.
Okay, well, as good salespeople here, we're going to make that pitch for audiences to come out and see this concert this weekend. You've got another practice. You've already run it through once already. Yep. You've got another practice coming up. You're no stranger to the audiences of the WJO, but we're talking to people who perhaps haven't gone to a Winnipeg Jazz Orchestra concert yet. Give me the cell line on this.
Well, this is an opportunity. This is only the second time this piece has been played in Canada. We did it in Vancouver in 1999. The CBC recorded it and broadcast it at that time, and it hasn't been heard since. We haven't played in Vancouver since. We played the blues, that one movement, but we haven't played the whole thing. So I think to not just the skill set of all the performers involved, the band and Heitha, I'll get that before I leave. Yeah, it's okay. And then the importance, the artistic qualities of this piece of music, and to balance that, we're bringing in some new arrangements of some old Ellington favorites, some real straight up swing, and you're singing on three of those things. One's a Billy Strayhorn arrangement that he did for Ella Fitzgerald, and so it's a good mix of the highbrow, if you will. Although it still sounds like Duke Ellington to me.
Yes.
And then with all the other stuff, where contemporary writers like Rob McConnell and the late Ron Collier as well, and some things of my own, and Jeff Presslaff. So we've all contributed to the other half of the program.
Okay. And Heitha?
Well, I think it's really interesting for those people who are more used to the Ellington sound being, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. You get a chance to hear this other part of his career, this ambitious artwork that kind of broke the mold of Duke Ellington's sound as he knew it, and you get this orchestral sound with a big band tapestry, and that is something that is extremely interesting. And so I think if you are a classical fan, you can come and you can hear how these two worlds have sort of combined. And don't forget, he did this at Carnegie Hall, and so he's playing this music to an audience that is used to walking into Carnegie Hall and hearing Tchaikovsky, who played there probably in the 1919 or
whatever
it was. So, he's combining these two things. But then we throw you a bone and we're playing, some great arrangements of, it don't mean a thing, right? So you don't have to, it's kind of for everybody when you come. So I know that my Auntie Nan will be there. Hi, Auntie Nan, she'll love it. But I'm going to have friends that are just big band fans, and they're going to come and they're going to walk away with a new idea in their mind of what a big band orchestra can offer. And this is music that was made in the 40s. So you fast forward to Maria Schneider or any of those contemporary big bands
That's where we'll come from today.
That's all, like this, that was him breaking the mold back in the 40s, and we have, that happening nowadays.
And it continues to evolve.
Yes, exactly.
And as Fred, as you alluded to, the fact that it has only been performed twice in Canada.
This is the second time.
This will be the second time. So this definitely is one of those moments where you can say, I was there.
Yes,
totally.
absolutely.
Yeah. And musically, I always, when I hear a piece of music in a performance or on a recording of some sort, I always go, did I enjoy, for me, I just kind of simplify the whole thing down to the story. Mm-hmm. Did I enjoy that book? Did I enjoy that piece of music? And yes, even though critics at the time were not kind to it, I go, no. And then when you understand the mold that he broke, and as she says, this for everybody.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I'm actually going to go out on a piece courtesy of Fred here. Fred has his own orchestra, conveniently named the Fred Stride Jazz Orchestra.
Yes, no copyright issues.
No copyright issues there, that's for sure. We're actually going to hear a piece that is on your current disc called Forward Motion. And tell me a bit about this piece that we're going to play.
It's a piece called Oddly Enough. And I actually wrote this originally for high school students.
Okay.
And then we were playing. It's kind of fun to play, and we would have a lot of fun in live performances, especially in the solo section. And then as we started working on rehearsals and stuff, as we went towards the recording, I changed the saxophone parts to clarinet parts. So we have like the Winnipeg Jazz Orchestra has also played this. On one of my earlier visits, we played this as well. It's just a lot of fun. It's just nice and bouncy. The clarinetist who plays the solo is Tom Kalkler, who came with me on one of those visits to Winnipeg. I think the second time I was here. And then the piano solo is the late Ross Taggart, who was a multi-talented musician, saxophone, and piano.
And I played some of Ross's music on my show here. And I noticed it's actually your album is recorded on Cellar Live.
That's right.
The Vancouver label.
Ross, I remember when we were listening to a playback after we laid down the version, and he wanted to do it again. So he wanted to play a different solo, and I said, no, I love the solo, because Ross played with such passion, his rhythmic bounce and everything that he would play with, his imagination. And then there's one, and you'll hear it, his sense of humor that comes through in the music. He was always telling funny stories and always breaking us up and stuff. So it was sad when we lost him. He was only 45 when we lost him. So.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you both for coming by this evening to talk about this concert. And the good thing is that there are tickets still available. It's going to be at the Winnipeg Art Gallery on Saturday night, Sunday afternoon, as well as Sunday evening. And Ellington's Black, Brown, and Beige. I'd like to thank my special guest, Fred Stride, out of Vancouver, and also our own Heitha Forsyth. And why would I stumble on Forsyth for some reason?
It's because the first name. I have to thank my parents directly for that one.
Yeah. That's okay. You should have a name like Colligan and then worry about water softener.
Right.
But I thank you both for coming by, because I know this is going to be a tremendous weekend, and a lot of people, like I was saying, are going to say, I was so glad I saw that work finally performed like this. So thank you very much both for coming by tonight. Our here pleasure. On Jazz After 9. We're going to end off tonight with the Fred Stride Jazz Orchestra, and you're listening to Jazz After 9 on Classic 107.